Hello and welcome to Round Table. On the eastern fringes of Europe, on the border with Belarus, Lithuania is now building a 550-kilometre-long razor wire wall to stop a sudden flow of migrants into the country. And it is the very speed with which this influx has happened that has led to accusations that the Belarusian president is using the migrants to keep himself in power and to put pressure on the EU to lift sanctions. Very good to have your company. I'm David Foster. So is Alexander Lukashenko, with Russian help, actually flying in the men, the women and the children and using them as political pawns. More than 2,000 migrants have crossed from Belarus into Lithuania this year, 1,400 in July alone. The Belarusian President, Alexander Lukashenko, stands accused of weaponising migration to put pressure on the European Union to scrap sanctions and to punish Lithuania for supporting the opposition. Russia has also been accused of helping Lukashenko to transport migrants from parts of Iraq and Africa to the EU border. Frontex, the EU's border agency, is deploying 60 officers after Lithuania requested rapid intervention. They will assist in patrolling, gathering data on illegal border crossings, and interviewing migrants. Will the European Union's measures stem the flow of people at its eastern frontier? And if Lukashenko is really involved, will his tactics work? Well, let's go to the Lithuanian capital, Vilnius, and there we can see and welcome the country's Vice Minister of Foreign Affairs, that's Mantas Adomenas. Minister, very good to have you on the programme. You're building this wall, or you have built part of it already. Have you managed to stop all the migrants getting through, or are they still coming into Lithuania?
They are still coming in. We have a long border of 678 kilometers. We only just starting to build a fortified barrier. But of course, we're bolstering also our military forces, our police. The Frontex officers are coming from all over Europe. So there's going to be a much stronger presence of border guards and much more difficult to cross. So we already see certain lowering of levels, but it's still coming on. But we think we'll be able to reduce it in the end. It's not an easy way to get to Europe.
If you have the military there, if you have Frontex's troops, are the migrants going to get a tough reception if they try to get into Lithuania?
It's certainly much more difficult to cross the border now, and all of them are going to be detained and until their sort of asylum applications are processed. But so far, the success rate of asylum applications is 0.
Will you be trying to prevent them from actually coming in using some kind of force in those areas where you don't have the razor wire?
Certainly not. We are following all the conventions on the treatment of refugees and migrants, but we're dealing here not with refugees, but with people who are coming from a country which is safe to them, from Belarus, where they travel as tourists. So they do have no chance of being recognized as refugees, and they're going to be detained and eventually sent back.
Your assertion is that President Alexander Lukashenko is deliberately sending these migrants from his country into yours, A, to put pressure on the EU to drop sanctions, and secondly, to pressurize Lithuania for housing the Belarusian opposition. What proof have you got of that?
Well, Lukashenko's words. He said himself that he is going to send the migrants to the countries which are unfriendly to him, and Lithuania is foremost on the list. And so he said it so explicitly. We have the evidence of the involvement of state-owned agencies, Tender Kurort, state-owned hotel chain in the sort of housing the migrants when they come from Baghdad and Istanbul, and as well as the non-cooperation of the Russian border guards and the presence of uniformed men in the testimony of the migrants who had directed them to the less protected areas of the border. So the evidence is there. It is a politically motivated way of using the plight of these people to use them as a sort of human missile, in a sense, or sort of to bring pressure on Lithuania, whose principles stance vis-à-vis Lukashenko's dictatorial, illegitimate regime was leading the European policy.
And what evidence do you have to back up the claim that Russia is helping with this process?
Well, it's not a statement that, we're not stating that we do not have direct evidence of direct involvement at the moment, but the techniques which are used are very similar to the use of migrants, organized flow of migrants in relation to Finland and Norway in 2015 and 16. So when the thousands of them were sort of brought, in organized fashion from the Russian side to increase the pressure on Finns and Norwegians to negotiate with Putin. The pattern is very much the same. The technique is the same. If it looks like a duck, if it quacks like a duck, it's more likely to be Russian involvement.
Your boss, the Foreign Minister, Gabrielus Landsbergis, has said, we've seen Finland facing this before, Greece recently, Spain, now Lithuania. Lithuania is paying for the wall. It's got Frontex coming in, but it hasn't had very many other countries offering to send any kind of military help. I know the Czechs have. Do you feel a bit abandoned by the European Union?
Not in the least. We have offers coming in now, and sort of from Poland. Yes, you mentioned Czechs. There are sort of Visegrad countries together. Estonians, policemen here. Also offers of help from further afield. So no, we feel solidarity, and in fact, the way that European Union institutions help to raise the profile of this new way of hybrid aggression is a very clear proof of how sort of the mechanism of European solidarity works.
Okay, two questions to round this off, Minister. What do you feel is happening on the European Union's eastern border, and is it destabilizing to your country?
Well, Lukashenko is very optimistic if he thinks that he can destabilize it through such means. But we have to feel the pity for these people who pay thousands of euros to get through what they think is an easy way into the EU. They're going to be detained here. We're also guarding the internal border with Poland, so there is no for them to get further west from Lithuania, and they will be eventually returned. So we have to take into account their plight, and they will have. They're being deceived by the dictator, but no, it's not going to destabilize Lithuania.
Minister Adomenas, thanks for taking the time to talk to us here on Roundtable. Well, joining us now from Vilnius, we have Dovile Sakaliene, a member of the National Security Committee in the Lithuanian Parliament. We go to Prague, and we welcome Pavel Havlicek, a research fellow at the Association for International Affairs. We return to Vilnius, and we welcome once again Katsiaryna Shmatsina, fellow at the Belarusian Institute for Strategic Studies. Dovile, you were listening to what the minister had to say. I know you've been up to the border fairly recently. He says that migrants are still getting through. What did you see?
Well, yes, we still see that very clearly organized process by the regime of Mr. Lukashenko, the illegitimate leader of Belarus. And what we also see is that we have instrumentalization of migration, obviously. So we are, of course, protecting the external border of European Union, but at the same time, we are going to keep the international standards of human rights protection as well.
You've just had a briefing at the National Security Committee. What were you told about where Lithuania stands with regards to what's happening?
Apart from information which is classified, the situation is pretty stable. So there is still a flow of migrants, people which were instrumentalized as a tool of political pressure for European Union, as a reply to the sanctions by European Union. But as you know, it's never really helpful to negotiate with dictators. So we're going to continue our line. We're going to apply whatever means necessary. And we're really happy to see that now I think 12 European Union states are helping us or planning to help. And also Charles Michel and Ursula von der Leyen has expressed their full support for what we're doing. And also certain funds have been allocated to strengthen our security.
Do you understand the strength of animosity across the border in Belarus when Lithuania opens up the center for the Belarusian opposition that is in Vilnius. It refuses to extradite the leader of the Belarusian opposition. Do you understand why Lithuania has become a target, if that's what you believe it has?
Well, I would say that European Union has become a target, and Lithuania simply has external borders and has been probably more outspoken. And Madame Tsikhanovskaya has taken refuge in Lithuania. But probably we all understand that when someone, a dictator, grabs power, not through elections, but simply through sheer force, then there is no need to negotiate, or there is no use in negotiating. So I'm hoping that we, as European Union, and as was said by Mr. Michel, we speak in one voice. We are going to somehow stay in there. So we are going to stand up to this regime.
Okay, we'll be back with you, Dovile, in just a moment. I'm mindful that you, both you, Pavel and Katsiaryna, have been sitting there for quite a while listening to what's been said. But Pavel, let me come to you first of all. First of all, is the European Union in any way likely to back down over these sanctions if that is what Lukashenko wants?
I think by no means. Actually, instead, we are looking at increasing reaction from the European Union. We have seen at the last EU Foreign Affairs Council that there was this kind of unity, that everybody needs to support Lithuania. There has been talks within Brussels and the EU institutions, but also at the member state levels, including my country, the Czech Republic. Just last week on Friday, there was a Security Council meeting, and the situation at the Lithuanian-Belarusian border has been discussed extensively. Actually, there is this kind of support from the national authorities, including the Ministry of Interior and Foreign Affairs, that there should be a special police mission, Czech police mission sent to the border to help and support our friends and allies in Lithuania. So there is this kind of understanding, and I can't possibly imagine that the EU would be stepping back from what it has committed to, which is to sanction the Belarusian repressive authorities that are just putting so much pressure on the population right now.
What is the worst that could happen on that border? How could it escalate?
We all understand how sensitive are the migration-related topics. Obviously, the issue of migrants and refugees has been divisive in the European Union and in the European societies across the continent. So, I mean, we all understand what might be the political and maybe social implications. Obviously, there might be also some kind of violence happening at the border. So there are these kind of threats, you know. And the Europe as a whole needs to be responding collectively to this, because it is a threat to one of the countries, which should be interpreted as the threat against the whole of the Union. There were talks about basically Belarusian regime punishing Lithuania. Czechia is likely to open also another official representation of the Belarusian opposition. Are we going to be next? Are we going to also be punished? No, we need to be responding collectively and pushing back against this dictatorship and behavior.
If Czech Republic does that, would it then recognize the Belarusian opposition as the legitimate government of Belarus?
Mrs. Tsikhanovskaya has visited Czechia and the Czech parliament recently upon the invitation of the president of the Czech Senate, and he himself has acknowledged her as a president of Belarus. So, I mean, there is certainly this kind of understanding, and there has been a cross-party and cross-institution actually understanding who is really the real leader and who is the illegitimate, basically, usurper of power. This is quite clear for the whole of the Czech Republic and its society.
Okay, Katsiaryna, let me come to you. Belarusian, you're from the Institute of Strategic Studies. You are based at the moment in Lithuania. When we've spoken to those people who've had to go into exile before, they've talked about the protests that are still going on in Belarus. And there we have Pavel talking about how the leader of the opposition is being acknowledged as the legitimate president of Belarus. But she isn't, is she, at the moment? Nothing seems to be changing in that country, in Minsk. Alexander Lukashenko is as solid as he ever was in the presidential palace.
Well, that's an interesting way you framed it, and I would rather disagree with you in a sense that Lukashenko, since the beginning of protests last year, he is experiencing the crisis of legitimacy, and the protest moods are not going anywhere. They are simply going sort of underground into covert forms, and the frustration of the society and the.
But we've heard this before. We've
yeah.
heard this before. Sorry, I'm sorry to interrupt you. But we've heard it before that there are no longer the big street protests, that everybody's gathering in little neighbourhood groups and whispering to one another, that it's all gone underground. But we don't see anything anymore. What evidence is that he's being undermined?
So I just want, again, to underline that the protest mood is not going anywhere. But in the last month, Lukashenko is using continuous repressions on virtually any group of society that is threatening him, including, for instance, political analysts. And I am one of those examples. I had to leave Belarus, had to abruptly to flee Belarus at the fear of prosecution. And I did so a year ago. And I, by the way, arrived to Lithuania with a humanitarian visa with a very which I'm very thankful to the Lithuanian authorities to hosting Belarusian sort of replicants who had to seek refuge in EU. And also, if we talk about even political analysts or researchers, in the last month, key figures among them were put in prison. And again, this just shows how the scope of the repressions and fear that
I don't doubt that in the slightest. I'm thinking about the hold he has on power. Because over the course of the last 10 years or so, I've spoken to countless members of the Syrian opposition who were very vocal in their belief that they still had the support of enormous numbers of people and that they would one day be successful. But there we see the president there being able to hold on to power. What makes you think Lukashenko will be shaken by what is happening?
So once again, I reiterate my argument that there is a fundamental request for democratic change in the country. That's one point. Secondly, if we look at the survival of the authoritarian regimes, if we turn to academic research, then usually the authoritarian regimes tend to maintain themselves when there is the agreement among the political elites to maintain the status quo. And indeed, at the moment, Lukashenko still continues to rely on the power vertical and this agreement of the political elites, but there are still some cracks inside those elites, and according to the evidence from the Office of Democratic Forces, there are attempts among the let's say key walls of Lukashenko or other representatives close to Lukashenko cronies to try to reach out to democratic opposition and to discuss the prospects, what changes, what guarantees they have in case if they withdraw support from Lukashenko.
Okay, so they're trying to play both sides off against the middle, and they're hedging their bets.
They are considering to change the loyalties, but still, there is one of the factors. And then I would say that Russia is still supporting the Belarusian regime, which is also one of the fundamental factors of current Lukashenko survival.
Yeah, and indeed, Russia stands accused, and we'll come back to you, Dovile. Russia stands accused of fueling this migrant crisis on the Belarusian-Lithuanian border. We've talked about the fact that Frontex, the European Borders Agency, is involved. Let's hear from the guy at the head of that agency. That is Fabrice Leggeri.
This migration crisis was created and is fueled by a political attempt to use irregular migration as a, if I may say, leverage to influence or to respond to some EU decisions, in particular the sanctions that were adopted by the EU about Belarus.
So now we have border force guards on the edge of Belarus and Lithuania. Dovile, what kind of role do you see them taking up there?
This is quite a multidimensional role. First of all, to make sure that this external border, quite a long border, almost 700 kilometers with Belarus, is really well protected, really well monitored. But at the same time, we're not going to repeat mistakes made, for example, by Hungary. We're not going to push these people back. We are completely capable as a European Union, as a state of European Union, to apply necessary standards that are applicable to refugees, for example. But another very important moment is, I would like to come back to your question earlier to one of the other participants, to Ms. Katsiaryna. Lukashenko has become isolated, fully isolated. Also, he's suffering really huge economic difficulties. And also, he has become really inconvenient for Putin himself. Probably you have noticed what we see also on the international scope, the difference of behavior and how Putin is treating Mr. Lukashenko recently. So next to what is different about the society of Belarus, which is as united as it never was in the previous elections, which were also fabricated, this time he is also suffering a huge international pressure, and his actions are desperate.
Hence the sanctions, and hence why he may not want to have them, and why perhaps he's pushing the migrants across the border, even if that does seem a bit futile. But I want to concentrate on the practicalities. You say that there will be no repeat. Lithuania will not allow a repeat of what happened in Hungary with Frontex, what are known as pushbacks. The same happened in the Aegean Sea, when Frontex tried to prevent migrants getting into European Union waters and supposedly pushed them back. Investigations there. What guarantee have you got that these migrants will not be treated in the same manner by the Frontex guards on the border between your two countries?
Well, we are closely cooperating. We're working all together, and I am a member of National Security and Defense Committee the second term. I completely trust my military forces. I completely trust my border guards, and I am in communication with them also constantly. And I know that we are definitely going to keep to the standards that we apply to others. So I don't have doubt in my people, in people of Lithuania. And talking about Frontex guards, they are really intelligent, smart people. And I think we all have ability to learn our lessons. And from what I see now, their support and their help is really going very well, really into the right direction.
Okay, Pavel, is there a concern amongst the broader European Union about deploying Frontex to these different areas, given the fact that some of their actions in the past have attracted the wrong sort of headlines?
This has been a learning process, I believe, also for the agency that has faced some difficulties recently, but I think is fully equipped and capable of providing this kind of support to Lithuania as a member state that has the primary responsibility to protect the borders. The agency is here to support and facilitate, contacts.
Well, yeah, but that's what it's supposed to be doing. And you talk about a learning curve, whereas in actual fact, what it's been doing is pushing dangerously flimsy boats back across the water, upsetting some of them, making sure that these migrants do not in any way get to where they want to go. What is to stop them using the same sort of tactics here? That must be a concern.
I mean, the landscape is certainly different, right? If you are speaking about the sea, and here the situation is much different. Basically,
but the attitude might be the same.
The attitude might be similar, but I think, as I said, I believe, and I have also the trust in both the Frontex agency and also the national authorities. Don't forget that these are also member states that are supposed to help. I already referred to the Czech police mission. There has been this kind of expertise and experience from the Western Balkan countries. So I'm sure that this kind of experience will help to facilitate what is supposed to be facilitated, which is the protection of these people, but also at the same time a protection of the people of Lithuania and the national sovereignty, which is the most important.
Katsiaryna, on this program, on many occasions, we've talked about the ripples that go out from small little actions. It's known as when a butterfly beats its wings. Who knows what's going to happen elsewhere? When you take a look at this razor wire, and we all know how lethal that can be, the moment that one migrant, be he, she, or a little boy or girl from Africa, from Iraq, tries to get over that and becomes mutilated, or at the worst actually dies, then it becomes a much, much worse situation, doesn't it?
Already the attempts of the Belarusian regime to frame the situation that way, that the Lithuanians were allegedly mistreating those immigrants and then trying to beat them and send them back to Belarus, but this sort of messages, they hardly stand criticism. Like when the facts are double checked, and the situation that you portrayed, it definitely complicates things. But I would say that at the moment, the factors on the like possible tensions between EU and Belarus, I would watch out for at the moment is the upcoming joint military exercises of Russia and Belarus, and then like the Russian troops are already on the Belarusian ground, and then I would see like how this exercises would go, and if there could be any possible sort of attempt to irritate the European counterparts at this moment.
Well, listen, thank you very much indeed. It is undoubtedly an extremely delicate situation. You on the Lithuanian Dovile National Security Council will no doubt be watching this extremely carefully, as will we. We thank you, Pavel, once again for coming on the program, and Katsiaryna also, much appreciated. We will keep our eyes and ears open, and we hope you will do the same via us. Thanks for coming on the program. And wherever you happen to be watching this edition of Roundtable, we thank you very much indeed. It is a dangerous world, and that is a particularly volatile part of it at the moment. So from me, David Foster, and the Roundtable team, we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.